We've had the worst winter in 50 years, the driest spring in 100 years, but the work still goes on here on the allotment. Welcome to Self-Sufficient in Suburbia. As we try to become self-sufficient, we need to use potatoes to replace, for example, a lot of the wheat that we use in bread making. We use potatoes for other foods as well. And what we've done this year is we've actually doubled the amount of space that we have put over for potatoes. Now we've got these potatoes in now. The other side of bed 2 there will be used for more potatoes, which we'll put in the next few days. Now one of our other staple crops is onions, and we've got those planted out on bed 1 here. Now we've doubled the amount of space that we've got put over to onions, and we've also added in the shallots and garlic on this bed as well. And as you can see, it does actually need a bit of weeding, which is one of my jobs that's coming up to be done. Because it's spring, we've also been getting a lot of wild garlic as well, which we've been out picking, and wild garlic is one of my favourite wild foods. And back in the kitchen, we've been using some of the wild garlic along with the rest of our potatoes from last year to do some cooking. Now this recipe is a good way of using up leftover potatoes. And it also uses up some of the wild garlic leaves that I picked the other day. And again, this is one of my favourite spring wild foods. Now for it, you're actually going to need your potato masher, because we're going to mash up some of those leftover potatoes, and we're going to make some potato cakes with wild garlic and a little bit of bacon added in. So just mash the potato up, and what I find helps with this recipe is just to put in an egg. It actually helps bind it all together, and obviously remove the bits of shell that shouldn't be there, and mash that in. Then need to add in a handful of chopped wild garlic leaves, and then fry a little bit of bacon, and just add that in. Chop it first before you fry it. Add in the oil that it came with as well, and then sort of mash it up and mix it all together. And any moment now I'm going to have to get my hands into this to make sure it's properly mixed through. Really get your hands right into it, give it a good mix up. Now put some oil into a frying pan and heat it up, then add in your potato cakes. Now you don't want the oil and the temperature to be too hot, because you'll end up incinerating your potato cakes on the outside but not cooking them on the inside, and that means you'll have extra hot on outside and rather cold inside. Now after a couple of minutes, check how they're doing underneath. If they're nicely browned, turn them over. You probably need to turn them over a couple of times at least to make sure that they're evenly cooked through. But once they're browned on the outside and cooked through on the inside, they're ready for eating. Well, this is the final product, and this is the moment of truth. Yeah, that's worked really well. Quite pleased with that. Well, this rosemary plant we've just put in, and it's one of a number of herbs that we've planted
And growing herbs is important because they flavour a lot of the foods, and because we've got things like a lot of potatoes, then we need to make sure that our diet is interesting, and therefore herbs are an important part of that. Now, the rosemary we've been using has been made into a jelly, and back in the kitchen we'll show you just how to make it.
Today we're going to be making a jelly with the rosemary, and the reason why we're going to do that is because we have an awful lot of this. This is a bag full of apple cores and apple peels, because we use an awful lot of apples that we pick wild or grow it on the allotment. We use a lot of them in cooking, and instead of throwing out the apple cores and the apple skins or feeding them to the rabbits, we store them in the freezer, and when the bag that we put them in is full, we get them out and we use them to make jellies. So if you want to make a rosemary jelly, this is what you have to do. Into a jam pan, put all your apple and make sure it's then completely submerged in water. Well, with the rosemary, be as generous as you want to be. Now, we're actually using both dried rosemary and fresh rosemary as well. After you've boiled it for about 2 hours, you then need to strain it. Well, the pulp has been straining for about 4 hours now, so that means it's about ready for the liquid to be measured and to go back into the pan. Now, in the meantime, we've been making some of these. These are apple pies, and as a result of that, the bag that we had of apple peel and apple cores has filled up again. So that will go back into the freezer, and we'll use that sometime over the next few weeks to make some more jelly. But in the meantime, I'm going to have a quick swig of a glass of homemade sloe gin before getting that back into the pan. It's Saturday evening anyway, so I'm allowed 1 or 2 sins. So, put the liquid in the pan on the cooker and bring it up to the boil. And if you're really curious, that is a pan of lemon and lime marmalade that we're making. We're having a bit of a preserves day today. Well, when it's come up to the boil, you need to add 1 kilo of sugar for every litre of liquid. You then need to boil it hard until it's reached its setting point, and to check for that you just put a little bit on a saucer and let it cool down. If it's formed a skin like this one has here, then that means it's reached its setting point and can go into jars. Well, to give it a finishing touch, we're just going to add in 1 sprig of rosemary to each jar.
Everybody knows about nettles. They sting you, and they're regarded as a weed, and in the spring they all start growing seemingly everywhere. But actually they're quite a good food, and they're a bit like spinach in a way, because they're full of iron. They're actually quite good for you. Now, obviously I'm wearing gloves to pick them, but the sting is along the serrated edge of the leaves and along the stalk, and it's got tiny hairs all over the edge and on the stems, and it's the hairs that sting you. So you can actually hold a leaf like that, and as long as you don't touch the edge, you're not going to get stung. Now, we use these for making tea, but back in the kitchen I'm going to show you a few recipes for making flans and soups with nettles.
Now, this is water that we boil some potatoes in for another meal. Now, when you boil vegetables, you can often boil out some of the goodness that's in them, and that goes into the water, and most of the time that water gets thrown away, so you're actually wasting some of the goodness from your vegetables. So don't throw out water that you've boiled vegetables in. Save it, make it into a stock pot, or as I'm doing, put it directly into your soup. So just add the liquid to a pan, and then what you're going to do is add a big handful of garlic leaves. This is wild garlic, and it's got a very strong smell, but it's actually got a very mild taste to it, so you need lots of leaves adding to it. Then you're going to add a good handful of nettle leaves as well, and again you need a good handful in because you want to bring out that flavour into the liquid. Now, after you've boiled it and allowed it to simmer for about 25 minutes, at that point it should have brought out a lot of the flavour from the nettles and wild garlic. So at that point you just need to strain off the liquid. So for this recipe we're going to add in a couple of small onions, a couple of artichokes, Jerusalem artichokes, and a couple of potatoes. Once the liquid is back in the pan, you need to add the onions, the artichokes and the potatoes. Then we're going to add in a handful more of nettle leaves. As you can see, the gloves are back on for this. The liquid itself should have picked up a lot of the taste of the garlic and the nettle, so really this is just to give the soup a little bit of body to it as well. And we're going to add in some chopped wild garlic leaves as well. So just 1 teaspoonful of Marmite to finish it off. When the soup's come up to the boil, simmer it for about 20 minutes or so until all the vegetables have softened right through. You may also want to check it just to see if it needs any seasoning as well. So this is now ready, and go into our soup tureen, ready for our dinner.
On the allotment we have a large number of strawberries growing in the fruit cage, but recently they've managed to spread across the whole of the floor of the fruit cage, and now they've been growing outside the fruit cage as well. So we've been going around digging a large quantity of them up to bring back here to the back garden of the house to plant them in these grow bags, and at some point in the future we'll find a more permanent home for them. But since this part of the path isn't really used by us, it seems to be quite a good use to put it to growing the strawberries.
Now this is a dead simple recipe, and obviously because it's an omelette you're going to need a couple of eggs, so they just need to be beaten with a little bit of milk and some seasoning. You then need to chop the garlic leaves reasonably finely. You can actually use the whole of the plant, it's all edible, but chop it finely because you're going to mix this in with the egg mix, and just give it a good, and pop a bit of oil into a frying pan and heat it up a bit, and then just pour in the omelette mix. See if we can turn half of this over. There we go. So that will now cook on the inside for a moment. So once it's ready, out it comes onto the plate. For this recipe you'll need a short crust pastry like that. Now that means basically whatever weight of self-raising flour you have, you use half the weight in butter or margarine or some other fat all together, rub it all together and then add a little bit of water to get it all to set together. Then once you've put the pastry in your case like that, you then need to chop your garlic leaves. And once the garlic leaves are chopped, add them to the flan case. You're then going to need the gloves back on at this point, because what you're going to do next is you're going to pluck a handful of leaves from the stalks and put them into the flan case. You don't particularly want the stalks on because they're less edible. Then beat some egg and then just pour it over the contents, and that's then ready to go into the oven. Oven needs to be about 180 degrees for a fan assisted oven, or about 200 for just an ordinary electric oven. Well, the fan's been in the oven for about 10 minutes, which was probably about sufficient. So we're just going to check it now. And what we're particularly going to look for is to make sure that it is cooked right in the middle there, and it's still a bit soft, so we're going to give it probably 2 or 3 minutes more. So we're going to give it one last check just to make sure that it's ready. And yep, that looks fine. Just hold it up, and nice and crisp in the middle. Oh, nettle tea, a lovely drink on a sunny spring afternoon. Dandelions are regarded as something of a weed by everyone, and in the spring they seem to be everywhere. And most gardeners spend their time battling to get rid of them. But actually, weeds like this are actually quite an interesting food. And what we're going to show you now is how you can use some of the weeds that you find growing all around us to make a wild spring salad. Now this is cow parsley. Now in the summer it has small white flowers on it, and then it produces these small seed pods which taste quite aniseedy. But in the spring the leaves can be used in salads, so this is the first one that we're going to be putting in our salad. Well, raspberries are very familiar for their fruit, but a lot of people don't realise you can actually eat the leaves as well. Now don't leave it too long to eat them, because they are best eaten when they are very young and pale green. So we'll just take a handful of these and add them to our bag of salad leaves. I think we've hit the salad jackpot at this point. We've got here willow herb. Now in the
later spring and in the summer it comes out in purple flowers, pinkish purple flowers, and it produces all that sort of fluffy seeds which blow off in the breeze. And the growing tips in the spring can actually be used in salads. These are edible, but you want to get these very early because they become very, very bitter as the plants get older. Now also here we have dock leaves. Now these are traditionally known to be a cure for nettle stings, and they're often found growing next to nettles, as indeed we have there. And the idea is that you rub these on your nettle sting and it makes the sting go away. It's actually just a myth. It's quite a good story, but it's just a myth. But nevertheless, we can use dock leaves in salads as well. And also on here, this is a hawthorn, typically seen a very traditional British hedgerow shrub, and the young green leaves can be eaten as well. Now again, like with so many of the wild salad leaves, you have to get them very early in the season. Get them when they're pale green like that, because you leave them too long and these become quite indigestible. It's almost like eating wood. And the final one that we've got down here is the one that I introduced this whole section with, which is the dandelion. And dandelions are again a good wild salad crop. Right, the final wild leaf we're going to put in is blackberry or bramble. Now again, it's one of those that you've got to catch early in the season when the leaves are a pale green. Anything after that and they become very woody and very chewy and rather tasteless. They are actually quite dry, so when you use these you definitely have to have a salad dressing. Now this is sorrel, which is a herb that grows wild in Britain. We actually grow it here on the allotment, so it's one of the few leaves that we're putting into this salad, which we actually grow ourselves. But watch out for this. This grows wild as well. This is lovage, and again, this is one of the herbs that we grow here on the allotment, so that's going into the salad as well. Right, once you put the leaves on the plate, you've got to make your salad dressing. So take 1 tablespoonful of olive oil, add it to the jug, and then a couple of tablespoonfuls of white wine or cider vinegar. Again, add those to the jug, and then most people would sweeten it with sugar or with honey. We're going to use this. This is some of our homemade ketchup which we made last year. This is actually Horbury ketchup, and as you can see, typically with ketchup it is very thick, and we use this to sweeten our salad dressing. Right, if it's still a bit sharp after you've added all the ketchup you want in, just give it a little more olive oil just to take the edge off the sharpness. And if at the end of the day it's not sweet enough, just add in a touch of sugar or honey. We're going to add some potatoes to it as well. Now these are the seed potatoes for pink fir apple. It's a very good salad potato. We grow lots of it, but when you boil them they hold together very well, and they've got a sort of slightly waxy texture to them, so that's why they're very good as a salad potato. So we're going to add them to the plate, and we're also going to add in a bit of fried bacon. It's just chopped and fried till it's crisp, and then that goes on as a bit of a topping to the potatoes. And finally we're going to add the hard-boiled eggs. Now we're going to make them a bit more interesting, because what we've done is we've been out to pick some wild garlic leaves and we've chopped them and added them to the yolks of the hard-boiled eggs, and add in a little bit of oil as well, of olive oil, to hold it together, and then we're going to add these back to the eggs. So there we go, one wild leaf spring salad. Well, that's it from Self-Sufficient in Suburbia for May 2011. Join us next month when hopefully we'll have news about bees, ponds, polytunnels and chickens. So see you then.